Random things. 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 Hello, my name is Hakon, and today I'm doing something slightly different again. There is something going on around YouTube these days called what's it called again? Stay-at-home book tag. And of course, stay-at-home is referring to the current lockdown situation that we find ourselves in most of the world, which is a good thing, I guess, considering why we are in lockdown. It has made people read more. It has made people make more videos. It has brought people together at a distance, I guess, which can also be a good thing. Now, the stay-at-home book tag is a concept where you have a list of categories. It's to do with reading mostly, and you nominate. It's called a tag because you nominate other people to do it as well. I'm not going to nominate anyone because I don't actually have any YouTube friends that I know would be into this sort of thing. But I got nominated by someone, so I'm going to do this anyway. Now. A little bit of a backstory there. One of the people I subscribe to on YouTube is called Erin Draper. He has a channel called Fantasy Creek, where he has started playing fighting fantasy game books, which is something I am really into, as you would know if you watch this channel. So he was playing this book. This is The Warlock of Firetop Mountain, and he played it for the very first time, and he'd never played a fighting fantasy game book before. And he made a video series about that, and it's just a really enjoyable thing to watch, to see someone play it for the first time. Everything is new, all the concepts, the game, everything is fresh, and it's quite interesting to get that perspective on it. And also, it just so happened to be a really exciting playthrough as well, with lots of near deaths as well, quite hairy battles. Very exciting. And he will be making more videos about fighting fantasy game books and other stuff as well. I actually haven't looked, but I think he might have another channel too, because he seems to be doing lots of video stuff. So anyway, so he nominated me. Actually, I'll just show you the clip of that.
And the next one is Hakon Soreide. I'm not sure if that's exactly how you pronounce his name, so I apologise if it's not. He does really great sort of music, and he's been playing fighting fantasy books as well, and he's got a load of really cool videos on his channel, so his is also in the description if you want to check that out. So I'd like to nominate you.
Yes. And yeah, if you're watching this, Erin, my name is pronounced Hakon Soreide in plain neutral Norwegian. In my dialect, of course, because I live on the in Bergen I used to live on the Bergen on the west coast. We have inherited the German or French R sound, which means that in my dialect it's Hakon Soreide. But you can say whatever you like, and I'm so used to it being pronounced in absolutely completely strange ways because I live in Britain, and I don't mind. So in Britain I have to spell my name all the time. In Norway I never have to spell it, which is brilliant. Although actually my first name can be written in two ways, but mine is the standard way. Right, so let's get started on the list. So there's the first category is called laying in bed. Okay, I'm going to change the name of the category to its correct version, which is lying in bed. So there. Okay, laying something else. Lay is a transitive verb. Lie is a intransitive. Look it up if you don't know the difference. And right. So a book you could read or have read in a day. I'm change that too because that's also, yeah. Whoever wrote this list, it's a little bit, yeah. Anyway, so a book you could read or have read in a day, and there would be hundreds. There are hundreds of books I've read in a day, but back when I used to read a lot. Also depends what you mean by a book. But I used to read all the Hardy Boys books back when I was 8, 9, and they were about 120 to 130 pages, relatively large print, and I would finish one in an hour or two. So I would read 3 to 4 of them in a day sometimes. Yeah, and I would read them over and over again. So I've read hundreds of books in a day. Now, another book that I realized I have 2 books in my bookshelf I read in a day, but I'm going to actually talk about 2 more before that. Because the most interesting books, I think, that you read in a day are not the ones that you expect to be reading in a day. You don't sit down with the expectation of spending a lot of time reading. You just start reading, and then you just can't stop. I think those are the most interesting ones, and there's been a few of those as well. There's 4 of those really that I sort of remember most vividly. When I was studying literature, I had to read lots of books, of course. Um, but and many of the books I had to read were not that great, and I just had to force my way through them. But then there were others that, when I started reading them, I just couldn't put them down, and I wasn't expecting that. And there's 2 in particular from my studying days, and that was both plays actually. There's Henrik Ibsen Ghosts, which is an absolutely cracking play, and I can see why people all over the world are absolutely huge Ibsen fans, because it's just an amazing story and it's really well told. And another one is Sophocles' Oedipus the King, which of course is the Oedipus. That's an absolutely amazing story, because I think it is the quintessential Greek tragedy, and also it sort of tells us a lot about the Greek concepts of fate and of course hubris and all those things. It's just perfect. I think I'm going to make a separate video about hubris, perhaps, one of these days, because I think it's quite an interesting concept, and I'm not sure if everyone actually understands it properly. So, but it's very easy to explain, but I'm not sure if everyone's heard the explanation, so they might use it in a slightly wrong way, or they might not understand how important it is in Greek literature and that's sort of Greek mythological time mindset. The Anyway, there's 2 more books actually. There's and because that was when I studied literature, I read those and I had to read them, but I really enjoyed it. There's another book that I read when I was there's a writer from the same city as I lived in Bergen in Norway, who lived from about 1901, I think, until 1943. He was a journalist, an activist, a communist, probably some other ists as well. He was a poet, a writer, playwright. He wrote some cracking good stories. He wrote a few books, some plays, and he's got a collection of poems that is absolutely brilliant. Some of which I think everyone in Norway knows about. When I was in the Navy, I bought his collected works. This is one of the books here, and I haven't read the whole thing yet. I do sort of pick it out from time to time. It's one of my sort of prized possessions that live on my bookshelf up here. You can't see it; it's out of shot. I just really love the way these books were made as well in these days, with a proper binding. This is for first edition, complete works from 1947. And one day I took one of these books, the first novel in his collected works, and I took it with me when I went to have dinner at a pizza place. So I went into town. I went to eat a sort of pizza buffet, all you can eat pizza. Oh, I really loved those back when I could eat anything when I was younger. I could finish a few large pizzas all by myself and not put on an ounce of weight. Oh, good old days. Anyway, so I took this with me, and this is a book called, in Norwegian, it's called skipet går videre, and of course that is in my dialect there. The ship goes on, the ship moves on, and the ship continues, etc. It could mean different things, but the ship keeps going. And of course, this is a novel that is based on his. He was a sailor for part of his life. Nordahl Grieg, who wrote this. Did I say his name? Did I forget to say his name? Nordahl Grieg. Yes, Nordahl Grieg. Also related, of course, to the famous composer Edvard Grieg of Hall of the Mountain King fame. Like all the Griegs in Norway are related to him because his grandfather was an immigrant from Scotland, so they're all quite closely related. Anyway, so this is called the Ship Goes On by Nordahl Grieg, and it's the experiences of a young sailor, just like himself, I suppose, when he was young and he went to sea, like lots of Norwegians did, because the Norwegian merchant navy at the time would have been the second largest in the world after Greece, I think. It was absolutely huge, and lots of young people, they could go out to sea, and of course they would make lots of money, and they wouldn't be able to spend so much of it, and then they came back and they would be quite well off and spend everything in a really short time because they didn't know how to manage their money. But anyway, lots of people went to sea, lots of boys, and this is a story of one of them, and I can't remember what the story exactly is about, what exactly happens in it. I just remember that this was so captivating, I couldn't stop reading until I'd finished. I was sitting in the pizza place until I finished reading the book, which is 170 pages or so. Would have taken me a few hours to read. Not lying in bed, but yeah, eating pizza. Yes. So that's another one. One more book. I'll just point out one more actually in this category. Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach is a cracking good read, and of course the reason you can finish it in very short time is it's very short, and it has illustrations as well. This is one of those books that I think you enjoy the most if you don't know what it's about when you read it the first time, but then you read it again and you see different things the second time. So an absolutely cracking good book. You can read it literally and you read about this seagull and how he's trying to figure out new ways to fly and things like that, or you can read it metaphorically and it turns out to be about something else entirely. And it could be some kind of, you can read it as a sort of a Christian mysticism story as well. And also you can read it as, yeah, I'm not going to say too much about it in case you want to read this for the first time. But I do recommend this. This is a cracking good book, and it's well written. It's easy to read. It's for anyone, everyone. It's highly recommended book, and you can read it in a day. You can read it every day if you like. Right, what's next on our category list? Snacking, a guilty pleasure book. Now, before I say anything about my choice of book, I want to say something about guilty pleasures. I've lived in Britain for quite some time now, and of course I knew about the concept of guilty pleasures before I moved here, but I must say I don't subscribe to the concept of guilty pleasures at all, and I'll tell you why. The thing is, if something is a pleasure, there should be nothing guilty about it. I mean, why are you feeling guilty about? I mean, usually when people talk about guilty pleasures, it's about something that is, it's like you think people would look down on you for liking something because it's too commercial or too lowbrow or whatever, any of those things, and it sort of implies that you have an expectation of a kind of snobbery and an expectation of a kind of division of different levels of culture and how one is better or more important than the other. And of course, this is a very common mindset that lots of people have about cultural expressions of all kinds, whether it's music or books or anything, TV. Um, I think that it's a very negative way of looking at it, and of course there should be. I mean, there are things you should be guilty about, but not about what's usually called guilty pleasures. I mean, that's things that you enjoy. That yeah. So if you enjoy it, be proud of it. Shout it from the rooftops. Say, "Oh, I really like reading comic books. I don't like Shakespeare." That's fine. If people have a problem with that, they're being snobs, and snobbery is not good at all. So I usually describe myself, well, when I say usually, I once described myself as a cultural omnivore. I really enjoy all different kinds of cultural expressions, all different kinds of music, and if there are things that I don't enjoy, I usually say, well, somebody enjoys it, somebody enjoyed making it, somebody enjoyed listening to it or reading it or watching it, um, and let them have that pleasure because that's great. You have things in your life that you enjoy. That's you're supposed to. It's a good thing. It shouldn't be anything called a guilty pleasure. It's a very negative thing. So I've picked out perhaps the only book I've got that I think might qualify if I'd subscribed to the concept of guilty pleasures, and also it is arguably a little bit cheesy as well, and it's yeah. But I'll just show you the book now. This is The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. Recently went into public domain, actually, in most of the world, I believe. And this is one of the best-selling poetry books in the world. I think it's actually only second to Shakespeare, possibly. It's a prose poem. It's very easy to read, but it's a little bit. I mean, there are some passages in here that are absolutely sublime, amazingly well written, and then there are others that are just a little bit pretentious and cheesy. And when I read it for the first time, which was last year, it was last year. I sort of thought to myself that yeah, I could have written some of it a lot better, but there are some bits that are absolutely amazing. The style of it is a bit sort of almost sort of biblical, I suppose, in style. A little ecclesiastical style almost, but it's got some amazing passages, and of course everyone would probably know the one where he speaks on marriage, for instance, because it's very common reading in weddings, and it's a very good passage as well. Let's see if I can find it now. I did actually do a video about where I read that one. If I can find it now. I'm actually not sure where. This. And what of marriage, master? And he answered, saying, You were born together, and together you shall be for evermore. You shall be together when the white wings of death scatter your days. Aye, you shall be together, even in the silent memory of God. But let there be spaces in your togetherness, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you. Love one another, but make not a bond of love. Let it rather be a moving sea between the shores of your souls. Fill each other's cup, but drink not from one cup. Give one another of your bread, but eat not from the same loaf. Sing and dance together and be joyous, but let each one of you be alone. Even as the strings of a lute are alone, though they quiver with the same music. Give your hearts, but not into each other's keeping, for only the hand of life can contain your hearts. And stand together, yet not too near together, for the pillars of the temple stand apart, and the oak tree and the cypress grow not in each other's shadow. So that's a very popular reading at weddings, and one of the sort of sublime bits of the book. So I'd recommend everyone to read this. Actually, it's definitely worth reading. But some people might think it's a bit cheesy and a guilty pleasure. Well, let them think that if they must. But yes. Right. Next on the list is a sip of water. Mm. Right, next category is called Netflix. A series you want to start. Now, a series I actually have started before, but I want to finish it, is one I'm going to pick out now because I don't have any series that I've thought about starting to watch recently that I haven't watched. So, and that is arguably one of the best TV series ever, and that is The West Wing. Now, The West Wing is different to many other TV series in the sense that it's not mindless entertainment in the sense that you can watch it and do something else at the same time. It's so dense with things happening, with dialogue, and it's very dynamic like that, and you have to really pay attention all the time. If you lose focus, you have to rewind it and start over again. And for that reason, it's very hard to get to watch it because I often watch TV in the background when I'm doing something else, and you just can't do it with The West Wing. So, but it's really enjoyable TV series. It might be arguably the best TV series ever, I think, for many reasons, and I definitely want to start watching it and watching the whole thing. So maybe that's one of the things I should be doing in lockdown, but I've been too busy being creative. So that's maybe I should have a break from doing other stuff sometimes just to have a little look at that. Next one on the list is Deep Clean, a book that has been on your TBR for ages. On your to be read list, I suppose TBR means. And I actually do have a book in my bookshelf that has been on my bookshelf for the better part of 37 years. 37 years, yeah. And a little bit of backstory. And I started reading when I was about 4.5. Because in Norway you go to school at 7. When I was young, you started school at 7, and that's when you learn to read. So I sort of knew how to read already, which helped. And so I could read quite complex stuff at an early age. And when I was 8, our teacher told us about the sagas of the Norwegian kings. Of course, that is something that will come up inevitably when you are in school, in primary school in Norway. And there is a book that tells the sagas of the Norwegian kings. It is known as Heimskringla in English, I believe, as well. Heimskringla, and also with a subtitle in English, it would be the sagas of the Norwegian kings, although I think there are some Swedish ones in there too. In Norway, you often refer to it just as Snorre, which is the writer, actually. He wrote other things too, but Snorre or Snorres Kongesagaer. And he wrote in Old Icelandic. He is an Icelandic man. He was a statesman as well, I think. He wrote stories of the Norwegian kings, and of course, part of his reason for writing about it was sort of to build up the powerful mythology and history of Iceland as well. And of course, family relations and genealogy, hugely important in Iceland to this day, of course. And it was such a big part of the mindset of the Vikings, or the so-called Vikings. Shouldn't really call them Vikings because Viking is something you do, not something you are. So I suppose Norsemen, one should say. So the Norsemen of Iceland and Norway, and one of his main characters in this book, and I think perhaps the reason he really wanted to write the book in the first place was it's got a huge section on Saint Olaf, Olaf the Holy, as we know him as in Norway, Olav den Hellige. And when I read this when I was 8. So I was 8 years old, and a teacher told us about this, and I was really fascinated. And I went home and I told Mum, probably, or Dad, I'm not sure which, that I wanted to read it, and we didn't have it, so it was purchased for me, and I started reading it, and I went through the first 200 pages, until I got to actually the biggest part of the book, which is the saga of Olaf the Holy, of Saint Olaf. Um, because the reason I didn't start on that was I knew that that was more than 100 pages and 200. Oh, hang on, more than 200 pages. Actually, it's half the book, isn't it? Oh my. 300. Well, hang on. It's almost 300 pages. So I read 200 pages, and you know that the next bit is going to be 300 pages long. Can put you off a little bit, especially when you're 8 years old. But this is a really fascinating book, and it's written in that sort of style that the Icelandic sagas were. Everything is very sort of short to the point. It's a style that inspired Ernest Hemingway and I think Ibsen as well. And lots of other writers have been inspired by that very simple style of it. And it's still got a kind of poetry to it. Although that poetry is partly lost in the Norwegian translation, and it would be preserved better, of course, in the original Old Norse or Old Icelandic, really. This was written in the 13th century, and in the 19th century, there was a sort of iconic edition with some amazing illustrations, and of course, these have facsimiles of the illustrations from the edition that was made then. So absolutely interesting stuff. I definitely want to finish reading this one day. It's a very interesting book, and of course it's part of my history in a way, being Norwegian. So and that is possible to get in English as well. You do get English language editions of it. Now, what's next on the list now? It's Animal Crossing, a book you recently bought because of hype. Recently, actually, there's only, as far as I can remember, I only ever bought 2 books in my entire life, only 2 books based on hype. The first one was The Da Vinci Code. Yeah, I know. I actually quite enjoyed it. The first time I read it, I really enjoyed it. So, and of course, if I'd had the concept of guilty pleasure, I might have thought out about it. But no, it was actually quite a good read. I mean, it's not the greatest story. It's not the best told story, but it's a good story, and it's a very captivating story, and it has some elements in it that really reels in the reader, I think, and sort of makes you buy into the hype and the concepts of it. So even though the story isn't original and you sort of stole the concept of it, and a lot of it is based on it's just pure hokum, it's not that great a story the way it's written, and of course some of the bits I did pick up on, but it's still a captivating story. It's a book that you can enjoy, and yeah. Anyway, so more recently, that's been quite a few years now. More recently, there was one book that it wasn't hyped up, I would say, so much. It was I hardly ever read reviews of books. I don't seek them out, but sometimes accidentally they might seek me out. And I was minding my own business and reading the news or something online, and I just happened upon a book review or an article about a new book that was coming out that was supposed to be a little bit different. And the interesting thing about it's not a new book, but it's a new translation. And this is The Odyssey by Homer. Can get more classic than that, can you? But this is a new translation, and also the first ever translation by a woman. And this will make a big difference for many reasons. Now, the thing is, when I read the Odyssey the first time, which was when I was studying literature, and I had to read it, of course. Well, I could choose the Odyssey or the Iliad, but I went for the Odyssey. Of course, the edition I read was one of the old public domain ones, probably from the 1920s or something like that, and it was trying to be poetic, and but of course it was trying to be poetic in an English way, not a Greek way, and it didn't feel so much like the original was written in Greek. I think partly that was one thing, and also I'm not sure it actually captured the essence of the story so much. Mm. And also, it sort of did have some of the hallmarks of a translator who perhaps didn't understand the story as much as understand the language. Um, and so that does make a big difference, I think. So in this edition, not only has it been translated by a woman, but of course she has also done what women do. They are very thorough in their research. And it's the cultural researcher went into this and not only trying to understand, of course, what the words mean, but also what the words. The thing is, when you translate, you have to consider all possible meanings, and you have to consider how the language was relative to the readers at the time the book came out, or well, in this case, the story was told, I suppose, and it was just written down at some point. Because this is one of the oldest known books in the world, really. But of course, the story is older than the book. So, and of course, the translator Emily Wilson, she's tried to do all these things. She's tried to think about all the eventualities. She has tried to sort of say what would the readers or the audience experience when they read it the first time. And of course, the Greek audience of the antiquity is very different to modern English-speaking audience today in many ways. First of all, they would know a lot of the mythology and all the stories. They were known to them before they heard any version of it. I mean, when you have any Greek tragedies, for instance, like Oedipus the King, when somebody goes to theater in Athens to watch a new production of any of those tragedies, they already know the stories. The stories are part of the culture, and they're going there to see it told in a different way. The Odyssey is perhaps slightly different in that this is sort of how many of those stories were told and sort of carried on from through an oral tradition that came before. But she's tried to analyze it and sort of try to find the essence of it. And of course, the essence of the Odyssey has to do with, just like Oedipus Rex, it has to do with hubris, and it's to do with the contract between God and man, or gods and men, I suppose. And also, there's an interesting concept here, which is just suffused all the way through the book, and that is the concept of how to take care of guests. And that angle is actually, when you read it with that in mind, you realize that this book is actually almost entirely to do with how you treat guests. Yeah, it's a bit of a strange concept, but it's interesting when you think about it like that. Well, not just about that, but it's there's so many different encounters where somebody is taking into someone's home, and how that is done differently depending on who it is. That you can actually read that as sort of the main narrative of the story, or the main moral of the story is how you treat guests. So I was actually planning to do a separate video about this book at some point, especially about hubris and also perhaps the thing about guests. I'll just sort of say briefly. The thing is, the civilized thing to do if you're part of the Greek elite in the 8th century BC is, when somebody shows up at your door, you do not ask who they are, why they're there, or anything like that. You invite them in, you give them food, you give them shelter for the night, you give them new fresh clothes, you give them a bath, and in the morning, then you ask them who they are, why they're there, and who sent them sometimes, and that's how you do it. This is repeated over and over again in the book, and this is what the civilized elite of Greece would do when somebody comes at your door. It doesn't matter if it's a beggar or a nobleman, somebody dressed in rags, or somebody dressed in silk finery. You treat them exactly the same way. And there's a reason for that, and that has again to do with the contract between the gods and men. and that is because especially Apollo and Athena, they would be walking around looking like people, and they would show up at people's doors and knock on their doors, and they would see if they were invited in and treated the correct way, and if they weren't, you would get punished by the gods. So if somebody shows up at your door, you have to assume that it might be a god in disguise. And that's one of your reasons for treating everyone the same. I think that's quite a sort of sweet reason for treating everyone right. But I mean, one of the essences of religions, when you think about it, is it's trying to teach people how to treat others. Um, Very often that is sort of in essence what religions are trying to achieve, is trying to make people treat others better and try to be less selfish, and that is also part of the Greek mythology and part of what makes the Odyssey interesting. But this only applies, obviously, to in the Greek world, to the Greek elite. And if you are, say, they also have the concept of barbarians the same way that the Romans did. Of course, the Romans and the Greeks, they have a lot in common culturally. If somebody is non-Greek, that means they are not civilized. That means they don't speak your language. And you can treat them differently. You don't need to do the gods in this book. They are for the Greeks. So if you meet someone else, you can treat them like trash. It's quite a fascinating thing. Anyway, I'm not going to say too much about it now because I was thinking of maybe doing a video on this when I finished reading it, and I'm sort of halfway through now. And yeah, so very good book, and I really like. Oh, I haven't said anything about the style. Now, one of the things she did, apart from of course analyzing the concept of the book and trying to figure out what the point of this book was, a lot of it also has to do with women, of course, and of course you need the female. Well, it helps to have a female perspective on that when you translate it, because you have Circe, of course, you have Penelope, who waited for 20 years. And of course she is being treated in a particular way, both by her son and by her suitors, that tells you something about the position of women in Greek society. So yeah, it's the style. She's tried to make it similar to the experience that a Greek person would have had when hearing the story orally performed for them, I suppose. It's very sort of, it's trying to keep the meter of the story, and so it's sort of quite using not too complicated words. It's not too poetic in the sense that they're not trying to use poetic diction. It's just trying to tell the story in simple words, short words. It works really well, actually. And I can actually recommend this one. I'm going to make a video about it one day. My favorite version so far. I've got another one in the loft. I actually should bring that out as well, so I can compare the two properly when I make my video. Oh, this video is getting long now. Sorry about that. Productivity, a book you learned or had an impact on you, which is not real English. What it means probably is a book you learned. Well, anyway, a book that had an impact on you. Okay. Anyway, a book that had an impact on me. I suppose there's not that many books I've read that I've sort of felt, wow, my life has changed now after reading that. Usually the sense I get, it's a good sunny now, getting a bit bright. I get from reading a book is more one of sort of, if it's a really good book, it's sort of awe-inspiring, or it feels like I've sort of been transported into a different world completely for a little while when I was reading, which is a wonderful feeling. I do like that when I get that at the cinema as well. But the only book I could think of that actually has had an impact on me in other ways is The Tao of Pooh by Benjamin Hoff, of course. The Tao of Pooh. I didn't know I didn't know a little bit about Taoism before I read this book. Somebody actually told me about this book, and Taoism. How do you explain Taoism? Well, you explain it with Winnie the Pooh, of course. There are many concepts in Taoism that, and the thing is, if you try Taoism itself in the sort of book of Taoism, I wouldn't call it the holy book, because if you think Taoism is a religion, you sort of actually misunderstood Taoism, I think. And it does have a sort of a original text, I should say. Not, I wouldn't call it the holy book. It's called the Tao Te Ching. Tao Te Ching. I'm not sure if that's the right tonality. Anyway, Tao Te Ching. And it's in the Tao Te Ching. It says the Tao that can be explained is not the real Tao, and I think that's the essence of it. Really, if you explain it, then it's not exactly what it is. What is the Tao? The way. It means the way, actually, in English. It's sort of an explanation, I think, for the balance of nature, for human nature as well. I mean, it's about. Excuse me, doorbell. Right, sorry about that. Deliveries. Everything is ordered online these days rather than going shopping. Yeah, so human nature and also nature itself. Just to state something really obvious, like water flows downwards. That actually is part of the essence of Taoism, is to understand that nature follows the path of least resistance. And of course, this is one of the concepts that is used in the martial art known as Tai Chi, or Dai Chi, I suppose. Because it's about sort of, if something pushes towards you, you just yield. You don't try to resist that force. And this is sort of part of the philosophy of Taoism as well. I'm not explaining it very well, but I think it's quite tricky to explain, and it's been a few decades since I read this book, and also a few decades since I actually tried explaining this to anyone. I might read it again and perhaps do a video about that, because I think Taoism is really interesting, and it did. Although I'm not the Taoist, I suppose, but it did teach me a lot of things. One of the things it teaches you is how to relax, because it tells you the importance of doing nothing. There's this thing in Winnie the Pooh, actually, and of course that's related here, I think, because there's one day, I think somebody asks, I think it might be Piglet asking Pooh what he's doing, and Pooh says nothing, and Piglet says, "Where are you going?" And he says, "Nowhere." And there's something along those lines. And so doing nothing and going nowhere is very important thing to do sometimes. I mean, people are so focused on goals that they forget to live for the moment. And of course, these days you hear a lot about mindfulness, and I think that also owes a little bit of a debt of gratitude to Taoism, because it's about being in the moment as well, and sort of pushing everything else aside for the moment. While acknowledging that it's there, you push other things aside so that you can focus on what you're doing, what you're experiencing, and you're able to enjoy it, you're able to relax more, etc. And there are things of that sort in Taoism as well. Now, the problem with Taoism is, of course, people misunderstand it, and I think sort of Taoism as a religion turned into a sort of weird kind of immortality cult at some point. That's not Taoism. So anyway, recommended book, actually. If you haven't read it, read it. Great fun. You might learn something. Taoism might not be for you, but I don't consider myself a Taoist, but I did learn something from it that I felt helped me in my life. Right, next category. This is taking ages. Sorry. FaceTime, a book you were gifted. I get very few books as gifts these days. I've got some in the loft actually that I was thinking of pointing out, but I actually would want to do another one because the other one that I had was it's in Norwegian, and although it is definitely worthy of a video in itself, I might say something about it some other time because I haven't read. It's a series of books, so yeah, I haven't read the last one yet. The book I got was David Attenborough, The Zoo Quest Expeditions, which is a merger of two books, I believe. This is the recent edition. It's not the original one. I wouldn't mind it having the original. I do like having older books sometimes. Now, David Attenborough, of course, I've been a big fan of David Attenborough's since 1984 when I watched the premiere screening on Norwegian TV of The Living Planet, one of the best natural history shows ever made. Actually, I would say that there's two. There's Life on Earth from 1979, or was it 1980? And The Living Planet. Those two, by David Attenborough, are the best, by far, natural history shows ever made, before or since. Of course, when they were made the first time, they were sort of a new category of show almost. And since then, people have tried emulating it, including David Attenborough himself. And it just doesn't have the same kind of impact anymore. And I can watch those over and over again until the cows come home. Anyway, slightly different, of course. Before there was Life on Earth, there was Zoo Quest. As the name implies, they were a team of people, a small team, very small team, that they were out to trying to get animals for London Zoo. And David Attenborough, he made a TV show about it, and also he wrote books about it. And it's absolutely fascinating, the kind of stuff they got up to, and the kind of hazards they experienced, and the kind of dangerous situations they got into. And it just seems like he was so young and feeling immortal that it didn't faze him much at all. It's a fascinating read. I read this I didn't read it in one night, but it didn't take me long to finish this. It also has some. It has maps and some photos, very good photos as well. Absolutely fascinating story, and yeah, I would recommend. Anything by David Attenborough actually is really interesting to read. So I've got some other David Attenborough books that I've. Some people might have seen them before I redid my bookshelf. I had them over here, so they might have been in shot in some of my previous videos. Right, next on the list before I. This takes too long now. Self-care. What is one thing you have done recently to look after yourself? Well, I don't know. I shaved 2 days ago. I haven't really done anything special during lockdown. The only thing really I have done that's different to normal is I've made sure to go into the garden and do some gardening every day. And I think that is taking care of oneself, because gardening it's good for the health. You get fresh air. It's good for your mental health. I think you relax. You can practice your Taoism or or your mindfulness by just being in the moment and enjoying what you're doing. So yeah, I think that's the main thing. And it's I have been a little bit stressed a few times during lockdown. I'll be honest. Not too bad though, because I actually do really enjoy my own company, and I thrive in my own company sometimes. But still, it just feels different. The thing is, freedom isn't to do everything you want. Freedom is knowing that you could and can do whatever you want. And people do need a sense of freedom. And when it's lockdown, you know that you can't go to the shops because they are closed. You can't go traveling. You can't go on a holiday anywhere because you just can't. Things like that. And even though you're not doing anything differently from what you normally would do, knowing that you don't have those freedoms available to you might make you feel more claustrophobic, more stressed, things like that. So, garden, brilliant thing, going into the garden. Dandelions, I might make a video about dandelions one day because dandelions are fascinating. They are evolved to withstand the efforts of gardeners to get rid of them. It's, yeah, if you've ever tried to dig up dandelion all the way down to the root, you know what I'm talking about. Bonus, name a book coming out soon. This is a tricky one for me because most of my reading life, I've not been reading new books. I've been reading old books. I like old literature. I like Shakespeare. I like reading Goethe. I like Christopher Marlowe. I like old poetry. Not so much a fan of new stuff, and maybe I'll make a video about that too one day. Why that is. So, oh, mail arriving. So I don't usually pay attention to anything new coming out at all. But when I got this, got tagged in this this book thing here, the Stay at Home book tag. I had a quick look at Amazon and things coming out soon. And in July, there is actually something that sort of caught my eye. It's called Dear NHS 100 Stories. And it's a short story collection. Let's see, that I have it here now. Edited by Adam Kay, and of course by various authors. It's a collection. It's what do you call it now? The word eludes me. Oh. Anyway, there is a word for it when you have a collection of stories by different people. And this is one of those. And it's of course it's about the NHS, and I said the subtitle is actually 100 Stories to Say Thank You, and of course if you live in Britain, or first of all, if you don't live in Britain, the NHS is the National Health Service in Britain, and it is one of the great British institutions, even though the Tories in England have tried to sell it off to private companies the last few decades. Naughty, naughty. In Scotland, it's still state-owned to a large extent, which is brilliant because it works so much better. The NHS, it's actually probably the only health service in the world that people have a name for that they know and that they use as a name. All countries have health services of some sort or other, but NHS, it's like a name. It's like almost like a personified entity, and that makes it very different, I think, to other places, and also during these days with lockdown and other things going on, and the reason for the lockdown. People have come to get a new appreciation for the NHS and what they do and what they stand for, and I think that's a great thing. And obviously somebody thought that why not collate lots of stories about the NHS to show how much we love them. So Dear NHS by Adam Kay, or edited by Adam Kay, will be released on 9th of July 2020. So that's coming up this summer. It might be something to read for your summer holidays or your staycation, probably. So yeah, that's the book that I found that caught me. The only book I found that caught my eye, actually. The rest is all a bit sort of samey stuff. But I don't know. Some when you see the book, just look through book covers, it sort of looks like so many other books are just exactly the same book over and over again. Sort of same love stories, the same fantasy stories, the same thrillers. It's all very samey sometimes. Right, I think that actually concludes my journey through the my bookshelf for today. And yeah, it's been interesting for me, I think, to pick out a few different things and just give some thoughts on them. I wasn't expecting to make it this long, but yeah, I'm not going to tag anyone, as I said. I just did this for fun. But of course, if anyone watching this feel like the need to express themselves in some way through the choice of reading, um, then feel free to make one yourself. So yeah, I think that's it for the moment. And I thanks for watching. If you watched the whole thing, which was very long, sorry about that. I might edit it down a little bit. And yeah, well, I'll see you again soon with my next video, which probably will be something else entirely. But also going through this, another thing about going through this is that actually it's sort of reminded me of some of the ideas I've had for videos, especially to do with the Odyssey and hubris and things like that. So I'm definitely going to get that. And maybe Taoism. I wasn't actually considering making a video on Taoism, but maybe I will make one someday. Although I do believe you probably get other good ones on YouTube as well. I think Alan Watts is making videos on YouTube. I haven't watched any of his videos. I just saw his name pop up at some point, and he's as far as I know, he's a big Taoist, and he probably has lots of Taoist videos. But different perspective, probably. So anyway, thanks for watching, and goodbye for now. Bye bye.